under the new constitutional system that we have, and it's the first one that I've ever chaired, so please be kind and gentle with me. Thank you. It's not a standing panel, so the membership will change from escalation panel to escalation panel. So the first item actually on our agenda is to introduce the panel. The panel is proportionate politically, 7 members, 3 Greens, 2 Labour, 1 Lib Dem, 1 Conservative. My name is John Galandris, Councillor for Stoke Bishop, and I'm the Conservative member on this panel. David, do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Councillor David Wilcox from Lockleys Ward.
Councillor Christine Townsend, Southfield.
Councillor Kaz Self, Labour, Southmead.
Councillor Tim Rippington, Labour, Brislington East.
I'm Barry Parsons, Green Councillor for Easton.
Caroline Gooch, Lib Dem Councillor for Westbury-on-Trim and Henleys.
Thank you very much, panel. Safety arrangements, there is no fire drill planned, so if the fire alarm does go, we do need to leave by the exit and we need to gather outside the cathedral and pray for our salvation. Item number 3, any declarations of interest? No? Okay. Item number 4 is public forum, and there may well be members of the public watching on YouTube, in which case welcome, but there is no public forum as such. None has been put in. Okay. Councillor Fodor has indicated that he would like to address the meeting.
Shall I go through the...
Oh, okay. Nancy Rollison, our legal officer, will go through the process and then Councillor Fodor will speak.
Thank you, Chair. So just to be clear that this meeting is not to consider the merits of the decision that was made. It is purely to look at the process that was followed and whether or not the articles of the Constitution were properly observed in the decision-making process. So it's the process that's being looked at, not the merits of the decision. And in any presentations, you need to be aware that you are not looking at a sort of debate about the merits of this decision. So the procedure is actually very well prescribed in the Constitution. The members of the escalation of who've called in or escalated the decision will present a case explaining reasons for escalating the decision. Members of the panel will ask any questions and seek clarification. Just to be clear, this is members of the panel only that will ask questions of those who have escalated. The chair of the policy committee does not ask questions of the escalation, the callers in or the escalating members, if you like. The chair of the policy committee will then make a presentation to the panel members, and again the panel members can ask any questions or seek any clarification, and likewise the members who've escalated do not ask questions directly of the chair of the policy committee. Members can then have a general debate, and in the course of that debate they can ask any questions or seek any further clarifications. They can then, when they're satisfied that they've debated the matter sufficiently, they can move that the matter is put to the vote, and they can make one of 4 decisions. One is that there should be no further action. One is to refer back to the relevant policy committee for reconsideration with issues to be identified. Thirdly, to recommend to full council that the decision is not implemented. Or fourthly, to refer the matter to full council for consideration.
Thank you very much, Nancy. Councillor Fodor, would you like to address the meeting? Thank you.
Shall I stand? Yeah. Okay, thank you, Chair. And it's just a short statement that I think will be a constructive approach to offer a sort of way forward for the panel. It's in the panel's hands, obviously. So I chair the committee which made the decision being escalated. That decision was, of course, taken by the whole committee. you know, the voting in favour and so on. But while we believe it was made within the rules of decision making, and the transcript of the decision is in the papers that you have, I know that there are issues that come out about how the decision was reached, which is what you're here to discuss. I think as a substantive item, there were very detailed papers, 124 pages about the item. They were fully public. They included additional material about how the issue had been addressed in the task and finish group, slides about the subject. But members did know that the issue was time sensitive, and a lot of time had already been spent in the meeting. It was almost 3 hours. So when there was a proposal to move to a vote, which was seconded, cross-party seconding, I read out the item so it could be voted, and you know the record of that. However, I acknowledge, and I did so several times afterwards on the webcam, it is not an ideal way to make decisions. I would have liked the committee, who had all had access to the issue and had debated the issue in a task and finish group, I would have liked them to have been able to make the decision in public and to ask questions in public. Because we want to see that is available to the residents of Bristol, not just to the committee, that they knew what the issues were and the questions. So with that in mind, and as chair of the committee, I'm happy if this matter does come back, for instance, to an extraordinary meeting, because it is time sensitive. Orders have to be placed and they're on hold at the moment. So we could debate it in public at a future meeting if you decide that you'd like it to come back to my committee. I'm happy for that to happen. I'm sure the committee will be willing to have that to happen. And the decision is, of course, up to the panel if you choose to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fodor, and thank you very much indeed for that offer, which the panel will indeed discuss. But I know that Councillor Logan probably wants to speak as well, and
So I think what we need
perhaps to respond to that.
Sorry, can I just clarify? I think having heard that, then now we move on to the presentation by the members who've escalated. So, bearing in mind what you've heard from Councillor Fodor, can you address the panel on the basis of that new information? Because you may decide that you don't need to go into as much detail as you may have originally decided that you needed to.
But it is up to you.
The answer is yes. So we really welcome Martin's statement. I think that does provide a very constructive basis for the discussion and things for the panel to talk about. So I will not detain the panel longer than necessary. I will make a couple of initial comments so that you can hear the essence of our case, but we will keep that short. Thank you, Martin, for that comment. The essence of our case is that you can't spend £14 million in 20 seconds without someone asking you what the rush was. And what should have happened is the meeting should have been extended by half an hour. And I don't think anyone in the committee would have objected to that. I don't think there was a reason why that couldn't have happened, and that should have been explored. You could have had another meeting. If we're now having, I think the panel should probably decide whether it wants an extraordinary committee or a referral to the next scheduled meeting of the committee. That's up to the panel to recommend and to be scheduled. I don't particularly have a view. I understand there is a level of criticality to the timing. We bring this here because we think making the decision in the rapidity that it was without discussion of the items in public is a breach of Article 14 of the Constitution and probably 2 of the Nolan principles on openness and accountability. There are things that the committee members would have discussed. For instance, a lot of the money is spent on buying something called EV-ready vehicles. And an EV-ready vehicle, if there isn't a plan to convert it to being an EV vehicle, it's just a diesel van with better marketing. So I think that the committee would have asked how long that would have taken, and that would have influenced the decision. I think there were questions about that. You would expect me, Chair, to make some reference to procurement. I normally try to. There's a little bit of an open goal here, so I will do that as briefly as possible. most of the report is on the substance of the requirement. There's a lot of detail on the loading capacity of the vehicles. There's not a lot of detail on the procurement process itself. The recommendation in the report literally says that the procurement process will be compliant. I'm sure it will. There isn't a discussion within the paper over what sort of frameworks could be used, whether it's a national or local competition. I think from what I've gleaned from the implication that it's going to be a local process, which we will run within the timescale that's been set out, which is challenging. But that wasn't described in detail in the paper, and I believe committee members would have asked questions about it. That is basically the substance of our case. I'm not going to detain the panel longer. Our case is simply the decision should have not been taken so quickly, and members should have had the opportunity to ask questions before the question was put. Having the question put in the way meant a vote happened appropriately within the rules of the committee, but it didn't give members the opportunity to ask questions that they should have done, and the substance should go back to the committee at a time of the committee's choosing. That's all we're going to say.
Thanks very much. Very concise and very clear. Thank you very much. So we're going to slightly deviate from our normal process then, and I'm going to put it to the panel now to ask any questions that they wish to ask. They may wish to just make comments, whatever really panel members feel they would like to do next. I think it's Barry's.
Thanks very much, Chair. I just have one small question, which I think is probably for officers. As Councillor Logan indicated that you weren't sure whether this would need to come back to an extraordinary meeting or to the next meeting of the committee and cycle. I understand that there is some time sensitivity to this, so just if we're minded to approve the recommendation to refer this back to the committee, I'd be interested to know from officers whether this would need to come to an extraordinary meeting.
Chair, you happy for me to respond to that? Yes, I have discussed it briefly with the chair of the committee as well. Our preference would be for an extraordinary meeting, which we could call very quickly, and we'd be happy to do that.
Tim?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think we're happy to hear from the chair that he's happy for this to go back to committee, because that would be, I think that would be the right thing to do in this case. Just in terms of the practicality of that, one of the things that everybody struggles with because of the amount of meetings at this time of year is finding a time. So I would ask that if an extraordinary meeting is called, that it's something that is found at a time that all the committee members can make, rather than having to go through trying to find substitutes and that sort of thing. So if we can take a collaborative approach to finding a time, I imagine it's not going to be more than an hour meeting, but yeah, there's a lot going on at this time of year. Just in terms of the decision-making process, I think it would be a good idea to put some recommendations forward to ensure that chairs are aware, for instance, that meetings can go past the scheduled time and that security will be provided until such time as a meeting finishes. I also think personally, I think it should be for the chair to ask if everybody's happy to go to a vote, rather than just calling a vote if somebody proposes it. So before a seconder is taken to that, I think if somebody proposes a vote, it would be good practice for the chair to say, is everybody happy for this to go to a vote, or do we, is there still discussion that needs to be had on this item? So, I'd like to propose that is something that is a recommendation that's made from this panel.
Yes, so as and when a motion is put forward, we can tack on things like making sure that meetings can go beyond 8 o'clock, for example. I mean, if it's a really important multi-million-pound decision, clearly the building can't simply close at 8 o'clock for that, or the meeting would have to adjourn to the next day. Big decisions shouldn't be rushed. Yeah, absolutely. Christine, I think you're next.
Yeah, thank you. So mine's related actually to what Councillor Rippington has just raised. I'm interested to understand, so the motion was proposed, there was a seconder, the chair would have then read out that the blurb that is requirements. At that point, or during that, there was no objection, and I'm interested to understand why that objection wasn't brought forward at that time, because I would have done that had I not if I'm on a committee and I'm not happy with the way in which the chair is taking things forward, I would have made that clear and asked for that as a technical point. So I've read the transcript and it came out after, as opposed to during the process itself.
I don't necessarily disagree. I think there are lessons here for the chair in terms of how these issues are responded to and the importance of ensuring that a decision is visibly taken to be done with appropriate due consideration and openness. I think there are lessons for all members of the committee. I think there was a certain amount of confusion, and members maybe lost the opportunity to challenge something that they could have challenged before the vote had been taken. I think that there are lessons for all of us about how to do that sensitively and appropriately. I think members were surprised that the vote was happening in that way and hadn't thought about how they would respond to that issue. I don't think members came into this meeting expecting to be unconstructive. I think members had questions they wanted to ask on the report, but not trying to frustrate it, just trying to explore the issues before a decision was taken over whether to support it. I think that, as I understand it, members were expecting to make a decision about whether to support the recommendation based on the response to questions they were expecting to put. So I think there's lessons for all of us in terms of how those issues are resolved.
Thanks. I think John. Hang on. I'm sorry, I'm being told by the legal officer, not at the moment, because we still have the panel wants to speak.
First of all, thanks, Councillor Fodor and Councillor Logan, for what you've just said. And I think I don't actually have any questions, because I think Councillor Logan's kind of answered some of the concerns I had about whether we would have asked questions. Having looked at the paper yesterday very briefly, it is very detailed, as has been said, and I'm sure I'd have had some of the questions exactly like the one you said about the fleet. So I appreciate your comments there. And I think the thing for me is addressing Councillor Townsend's point. It was at the end of a very long meeting. I sometimes find my brain is drifting a little bit, and not just a reflection on this particular meeting, but other meetings as well. I do find sometimes chairs do maybe try to move things on a little bit quickly, and I sort of do appreciate that maybe what Tim has said is we need to reflect on the actual process a little bit, maybe ask some additional questions before we move on too quickly, and that's just my only comment.
Thanks, Kaz. David.
Thank you, Chair. I'd also like to consider the reasons why this meeting was actually overrunning, and the fact that there was an amendment moved from the floor and an adjournment for over an hour while that amendment was discussed. And I don't think that really helped the actual meeting to be conducive in decision making because of that long adjournment. I think we need to be better as committee members to make sure that we submit our amendments before the actual meeting happens, so that the meeting can actually run in a proper, democratic and transparent manner.
Kaz?
Yeah, I wanted to sort of focus on the actual agenda item and the lack of debate on the sort of £40 million, but actually looking at the meeting on YouTube, there was obviously a lengthy debate on the previous agenda item, and it struck me that some of the councillors on that committee did actually tease things out in terms of money that was available, in terms of extended producer responsibility money, the £9 million. So it was, unfortunately, a very lengthy debate, and the amendment took quite a long time to produce. It was a very simple amendment. That did strike me as being very, very odd. But I think it was quite right, in my opinion, to bring an amendment from the floor.
Thanks, Kaz. I would say from my observation of the YouTube, it was a long meeting and everybody was very, very tired. And you know, I can see people being exhausted almost. Caroline, then Tim.
Yes, I think it would be good if amendments could be put in beforehand, because it does save time, but people are perfectly within reason to move things from the floor, and sometimes the way a debate goes means that, or the way the discussion goes, means that things come up and you decide to amend it as part of the discussion. So, you know, we can all try, but there is a right to move amendments from the floor. But yeah, that very long break did seem excessive. But then, of course, you could always move on to extending the meeting and running the meeting into the next day if people were getting tired. The one thing that I did note is, like Kaz was saying, people are getting tired. This was literally a 20-second period where someone on the front bench made the move, the person sitting next to them seconded it, and I think the councillors sitting behind hadn't really followed that was happening, and then suddenly we were going to a vote. You know, looking at other parts of the meeting, there were times when Councillor Fodor himself was confused about the process of what was going on, but you didn't really extend that leeway to other members of the committee for not being completely on point about what was going on at that time when they were already very tired. So I would just say, I would echo the comments that other people have said of basically always check, always just make sure that everybody's happy to go to the vote before you do it, because you know, if people are not there right with it to object, then you lose that opportunity.
Members of the panel, can I just ask if you've got any further questions of the escalators? And if not, then maybe if you feel it appropriate, I know that John wants to say something, then you could move on to any questions you may have for Councillor Fodor or for the officers. So if we can do that, if there's any further questions, and then you can hear, if you need to, from Councillor Fodor and John, and then we can have a general debate if that's acceptable.
Thanks, Nancy, for keeping us on track. Tim, I think you wanted to have a...
Yeah, just one brief question just to make this certain. Councillor Logan, in your understanding of the members of your group, my group, that were on the panel, the decision that they would have taken on voting on this item could have been different had a debate taken place than the vote that they actually made. Is that correct?
So that is exactly my understanding. I think members did not come in to the meeting intending to abstain from the decision or intending to frustrate the decision. They came in with questions they wanted to investigate. I'm sure members of other groups may have had the same intention, and then come to a view on how to support the recommendation following the responses to those questions. So yes, I think it's very likely that members from most or all groups might have voted for the proposals if they'd received satisfactory responses to those questions, particularly about the period of time that the EV ready vehicles will be diesel.
Thank you. Any further questions of the callers in? No. Okay. John, you've been very patient.
Thank you very much, Chair. It was the main thing I wanted to say actually was in response to one of the comments, but it's important to follow the process, obviously. So I'm very happy just to say something now about that. First thing to say is in my role, I have the privilege to attend a number of committees, as you know, Chair, and it's welcome to have an opportunity to learn and to see what other ways and we can improve in doing things. And in particular, points about the timing and availability of City Hall. I'll work with Democratic Services colleagues, and we'll take that away and review it. That's very helpful. In terms of the amendment process, the point that was raised, I thought it might just be helpful to say a few things about that. As you know, because you're participating in other committees, there's an agenda briefing some time before the meeting and before the papers are published, where a representative of each party is encouraged to attend, engage with the issues in the papers, to ask any questions, raise any particular concerns and suggest where there might be amendments. That obviously happened this time, as well as, this is slightly unusually, there was the extensive working group which had debated and discussed the issues beforehand. In terms of the particular amendment to the previous paper, I would just like to make a couple of comments to feed into the learning that the committee might want to talk about. The committee, that amendment did not come from the floor during after the debate or during the debate. It was emailed to Democratic Services just after the meeting had started. I think it was about 5:14, so about a quarter of an hour into the meeting, but before the debate on that particular matter had happened. It was actually a form of amendment which couldn't be put to the committee because it involved additional spend, which we hadn't had financial or indeed legal advice on that. So we managed in the margins of the meeting to seek some legal advice from the monitoring officer, and it was clear that that particular amendment, which had come before the debate started, couldn't be put to the committee. Hence, there was a very helpful debate, I agree. There was a lengthy adjournment of over an hour, where we had to sort of rewrite the amendment on the hoof to try and find a form of words that was acceptable to the person proposing the amendment, but which met the legal requirements. And obviously, at that time, it wasn't possible to get all of the advice in place. So it would just be a plea, really. I think that the way that that particular amendment played out was obviously hugely disruptive to the rest of the meeting, and I'm sure that wasn't the intention. But I mean, if wherever possible, if people could engage earlier in the process through the agenda planning or indeed up to the meeting, I think the relevant Dem Services officer did actually seek any views about whether there were amendments before the meeting. That would just be hugely helpful because it allows us to get the proper advice and for the meeting to run much more smoothly. As the councillor made the point, people within their rights to listen to debate and make amendments, but this was a thought through amendment which came up just after the start of the meeting, so it probably, you know, the most difficult one for us to process, really. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so I can move it over to, you can ask questions of officers or Martin or whatever. So, Tim, I think you were first. You were fast on the trigger there.
Thank you. Yeah, I think those are important points in terms of the way committees are run, and I think we all do have a responsibility to try and get things as upfront as possible to give officers time. But I think every party probably at some point has had a point where they've needed to do something on the hoof. But I think what's really important to remember here is that every item on the agenda is as important as every other item, and therefore whatever happened in the meeting prior to this item had a right to be discussed and understood. So therefore we need to make sure there are processes in place, whether it is adjournments or extensions, whatever, to enable an item to be heard regardless of what has happened previously in the meeting.
Kaz.
Yeah, it strikes me that in the previous agenda item, there was a lot of scrutiny going on by some of my Labour colleagues, in particular about finances. And I think you questioned, John, about the amount of the extended producer responsibility. And with all due respect, I think you were slightly unclear as to what that number actually was. It was only due to good scrutiny by my Labour councillor colleague Kirsty Tate, and part of the policy committee process is to scrutinise decision making, that we actually managed to weed out that there was maybe some headroom in terms of the finances in that debate. That's my opinion. You may want to respond to that. So, you know, I think, you know, it was reasonable. And I do appreciate what you're saying about the amendment took some time to the casual observer. When you look at what was actually presented, it was a very simple amendment. But I kind of do feel that, you know, that the actual agenda item, the £14 million to spend, needed proper scrutiny as well. And we heard, you know, Councillor Logan has said that some of our members wanted to ask questions. and the whole meeting sort of showed the value of scrutiny. The thing I'll say, well, I've got the mic is, we do some good work in task and finish groups, and I dare say a lot of things were discussed in task and finish groups, but they are behind closed doors meetings, and I think it's important the public are actually able to see and hear from members in policy committee meetings from officers what's been put forward for a policy item, just for clarity.
Thanks, Kaz.
Is that okay if I just respond? Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor. There's two different issues that I was trying to discuss. The debate is exactly what we're here to support, and that was very welcome. And I did apologise at the time, but I'm happy to apologise again. I did get the figures wrong. Luckily, my colleagues behind me here today, I never leave home without them, were able to step in and correct me, and so I was able to clarify that during the debate. But the debate was very helpful. Talked about funding, talked about all sorts of issues, exactly what officers are here to support councillors to do. What then happened was the lengthy adjournment, which was obviously slightly separate, and that's something that was all about the amendment which came before the debate, as I said. So I think they're two slightly different things, but look, we'll reflect on any findings the committee has, and we'll take the learning on board in any event. But I'm waiting if there's any correction from behind me, but hopefully that'll be okay.
Are there any more questions from the panel? Per the appendix, we can now move to a more general discussion amongst the panel, if the panel would like to make any comments. Tim.
Yeah, I've just got one small thing to say, which is the committee system was something that we were not in favour of when the whole debate went on about things. And I think one of the reasons that we were worried about it was the amount of time that cabinet members used to spend being able, making decisions, and whether a committee that happens every 2 months or so would be able to do the same amount of work. And I think this is kind of shown up in this instance, that what we're talking about here, people getting to the end of a long day, 8 o'clock, having to think about making decisions on £13 million contracts and sort of things. It does show that the stresses that the committee system does put on individuals. So I think we bought into it, and we like to engage in the debates and do the right things, but I think we have to remember we're all human beings, and the decision you make or the things you do at 5 o'clock in the afternoon when you're fresh into a meeting, and how you feel at 8 o'clock when you've been there for 3 hours and you've had very robust debate sometimes, and things can be quite different. And we have to sort of remember that when we're thinking about how we go through things. But at the end of the day, we have to allow enough time for it all to be done properly. We can't sort of cut corners because people are tired or whatever.
Thanks, Tim. David, I think you were indicated next.
Thank you. Yes. So I'd like to address Councillor Rippington's comments about the committee system. As a chair of a scrutiny committee and a member of overview scrutiny committee in the previous administration, there were £1 billion deals that were discussed at scrutiny without the relevant cabinet member present to actually discuss that. So I doubt whether I reject the accusation that the discussions that are made at committee aren't as transparent, because there was no transparency necessarily or debate about those decisions under the previous administration and the way that was running. I do think we also need to make some recommendations as a panel as an outcome of this. One of which should be that policy leads are briefed that they can actually overrun their meetings if they need to, and security will support that, given the accessibility issues of providing extra childcare for members or whatever, or the fact that the meeting does go on quite late in the evening. The policy leads do have the ability to overrun. The other thing is that policy leads shouldn't over-egg their agendas. I've been in committee meetings that have lasted 3.5, 4 hours, and everybody is completely knackered at the end of it, and that's not the best way we should be making decisions. So we need to be making sure that policy leads have also the ability to call extraordinary meetings to discuss extra items that they can't fit in their standard agenda panel timeframe.
Thanks, David. Amy, can we minute those? Because I think those are quite useful sort of and there are some of the learnings I think that we've had, which I think could be helpful to have in the minutes so that it's a good guide. And those are very good points that you make. Barry, then Caroline.
Wrong one. There we go. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think in the spirit of trying to take some learning from this and offer some recommendations, I think I'd like to suggest a few in relation to each of the three issues around the Constitution. So the first issue around the movement to the vote, there seems to have been some confusion amongst members of the panel about correct procedure there and when was the appropriate time to raise concerns about moving to a vote. So I think one recommendation could well be that we need maybe some refresher training for members of policy committees about correct constitutional procedure for debate and for voting. I think this seems like something that we could do perhaps as part of an all-member briefing. On the second issue around the speed with which this item was taken through, I mean, clearly, as people have said, by late in this meeting, people were tired. So there's a number of different considerations around things like extending meeting time, isn't there? And I think we do need to be mindful that yes, there is the capacity to extend meeting time, but also there are access and inclusion issues when we're considering what are already very long 3-hour meetings at the end of the day. So I wouldn't like us to lose sight of the fact that we do need to get through business in a timely fashion. And frankly, it doesn't seem that anyone really kind of covered themselves in glory with an extremely late amendment to a previous item and an inordinately long adjournment. So I think we do need to look at the amendments process and look at ways that we can streamline that at least. Bearing in mind, of course, that members do have the absolute right to move amendments from the floor. And then on the third issue around clarity of aims and outcomes, there are concerns raised in the escalation around the complexity of the report and information that members felt wasn't included. I think there's a couple of things there. As has been said, the agenda briefings and the ability of members to engage with reports before the meeting itself and ask for further information. We all as members need to engage with that. And in this specific case, since this report is going to be brought back to, hopefully, I would be in favour of bringing this back to the committee. There's an opportunity there for members to feed in and request any further information that they would like.
Thanks, Barry. And Amy, could just add one more to your list. It is possible to adjourn a meeting so that you don't actually then have to publish papers and all the rest of it again, but it can be adjourned if the item is urgent or critical. Strategy and Resources have done that in the past quite effectively. Tim. Oh, and Caroline.
Yeah, just on Barry's point about refresher training, I suspect it's actually true that we've not had any training in the first place on the ins and outs of how to voting procedures and committees. So I think that would be a very useful idea.
Thanks, Tim. I guess it should be part of the induction programme, but whether it is, I don't know. Caroline, sorry I missed you.
Okay, there's one thing I was going to say, that having been a vice chair and then moved off, there's quite a big difference in what you know as a chair and a vice chair already when you come to a meeting, because you've had the PCCBs as a chair and a vice chair, so there's definitely sort of going to be more questions coming up and more confusion from the other members. So I know that there's obviously the opportunity to go to the members' briefing, but often all the papers are not available in time for the members' briefing because that's 2 or 3 weeks beforehand. And also, obviously, not everybody is invited to that either. So it's only the leaders of each group. So there's definitely, you know, a lot more in your head going on at a meeting when you're not a chair or vice chair, because you've had to read all the papers in quite a short amount of time, and you haven't had the opportunity to ask questions beforehand and digest it in the same way that the chair and the vice chair have had. So I think that's important for chairs and vice chairs to be aware of, that it's very different being an ordinary member on a committee and having to grapple with all of this information kind of all in one go.
Thanks, Caroline. Kaz.
Yes, I just wanted to add to that point that's just been made, and also referring to sort of what Barry said as well, that as a sort of committee member, sometimes the papers that come are very complex and they do take quite a bit of reading. You do tend to see them quite late. And we need to remember that, as has been said before, we are all human beings, and some of our members have family commitments, have jobs, and it can be quite difficult for them to actually find the time to actually read some of the papers, because particularly if they're very technically complex. And I think this one on the EV vehicles for refuse collection was quite a complex paper.
Thanks, Kaz. Barry.
Just a brief recommendation related to those issues. One of the things that we make a lot of use of on my committee, certainly, is the ability to offer briefings for committee members, especially on particularly complex or potentially contentious papers, in advance of the meeting. And those briefings are recorded, so there's an opportunity for members to engage with them in a bit more depth than they would otherwise get.
That's a good practice, and we can perhaps add that to our list, which will be available in the minutes. Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I really value this discussion. I think there's lots of very useful material for everyone on every policy committee and indeed other committees as well. The fact that we'd had 12 hours of briefings, questions and answers, all the slides of which were in the papers for this meeting, do suggest that it's not always the access, the availability of the material, because it was available. All the slides about the fleet vehicles were in the appendices of the papers for this committee. And all the members of the committee had taken part in 6 workshops about a whole range of issues and had not 1 but 2 chances to discuss the complexities of fleet vehicles. So I'm satisfied we can learn from this, but also we actually carried out some of the things that have just been discussed. We'd had workshops, we'd had discussion. The public had access to the slides we'd had about fleet vehicles and the complexities of ordering vehicles, timescales, depots, charging facilities, grid access, all the issues that can only be lined up when we have a commitment to go forward with a procurement exercise, and takes several years, which we're now hoping to progress if we bring this back to committee and then do this. But I think the access to information isn't always the issue. Engagement in it, of course, helps, and we'd all taken part in a whole series of workshops about this. So including for members of the public, what we'd gone through and what we'd queried and how it had been portrayed to us, slide by slide, meeting by meeting, before our committee, was available on this occasion. So, but I'm glad we can reinforce that, because I think that's something very important for all complex matters. Thank you.
Thanks. I have slightly strayed from the brief because we are supposed to be having a general debate amongst the panel, but I thought I'd allow Martin to just to interject at that point. So, any more points that the panel wishes to make? So it's general debate for the panel. Any other point, Nancy?
Just for the panel to be to consider is now if what action are you minded to take and on what basis. So if you are minded to refer this back to the committee, on what basis, given the objections that were raised? So you need to address your minds to the grounds that were put to you by the escalators, which was not taking professional advice, a presumption in favour of openness not being followed, and no clarity of aims and desired outcomes. So that's the basis on which you need to decide whether the proper process was followed, and then you also obviously have been discussing your recommendations. So that's where you need to be directing your thinking at the moment.
Are we able, because we have an offer on the table, to actually refer it back to an EGM? Can we discuss that?
Yes, of course, but you have to be clear about the basis on which you're doing that. So you've got before you an escalation by members who's saying the proper process hasn't been followed. So you need to make a decision about whether that has or not been followed, and on that basis, refer it back.
Barry, I think your hand was first. A lot of hands.
Thank you, Chair. I think, as we've heard, particularly, I was struck by what we heard from Councillor Logan, that if some members had had the opportunity to discuss and ask questions of officers in the meeting, their vote may have been different. And so I think, from my point of view, I think the key grounds on which we ought to move to referring this back to the committee is the first one, really, the taking of professional advice, and the fact that by referring this back to the committee, having the extraordinary meeting that we've discussed, that provides the opportunity for members to take full advantage of the professional advice that's on offer.
Thanks. Who is next? Christine, I think.
Councillor Parsons has literally just said it.
Tim.
Yeah, sorry. No, yeah, absolutely. I do also think the grounds of transparency apply here on the grounds that a lot of things discussed in task and finish groups and that kind of thing, but given, the system, the public have the right to hear what those discussions are and concerns. So I think also on those grounds we'd be happy to refer it back.
So what I probably need is a motion to be moved and seconded, as we have had debate, considerable debate, hopefully sufficient debate, but I will need somebody to move a motion. I think Tim's hand was just that before yours, Caroline.
So I propose that we accept the Chair's offer to refer this back to committee and to organise, if possible, an extraordinary meeting within the timescales that the decision needs to be made, but with the proviso I added earlier that we ensure that all the committee members are able to attend at the time. Yeah.
A seconder for that. Caroline, are you seconding, or did you want to speak?
Yes, seconded.
Are we happy to move to a vote?
Can I just check also, as part of the motion, that you wish to include the fact that you want to raise the issues that that we've noted here? So that would be part of the motion, presumably. Yes. And is there anywhere in particular you feel those issues should be directed to?
Christine?
Certainly the policy chairs, when we meet, I think it needs to go there, but arguably all members for an all-member briefing.
Yeah. Barry?
Yeah, so just on that point, I think the recommendation about member training needs to go to Democratic Services, doesn't it? Other than that, I think all of our recommendations were either for chairs or for all members of policy committees.
And are there any specific recommendations that you would wish to include for the committee to consider when they're going to be considering this further? or is that already in the issues that you've outlined?
Tim?
Yeah, just the one other thing, thinking forwards in time, is that when we have new policy chairs, that this is included in training for, you know, anything that comes up here that's discussed at policy chairs meetings now. We ensure that learnings are taken from that, and that, you know, when we have a new round of policy chairs, that everybody sort of gets that passed on to them as well.
That's a good point. Yeah. Absolutely. Barry?
Actually, extending that, of course, I'd add on to vice chairs of committees as well, because they, of course, constitutionally can fulfil exactly the same roles of chair when the chair isn't available.
Good point. Any more points? So we have a motion moved and seconded, hopefully some recommendations that we can comprehend and will be of great use to future chairs, vice chairs, and indeed to all members. So, are we happy to go to a vote on this? Those in favour, raise their hands. Thank you. Any against? No. So I think that's a unanimous agreement. So thank you very much, everybody, for your time. Thank you for being kind. Thank you for being gentle with me. Thank you also for your offer, and thank you for bringing it to attention as well. So
Chair,
lots of learnings.
There is one point of order, which is in the Constitution it says that these panels should be chaired in a rotating order, but we have as yet not agreed a rotating order, so which is why you ended up being chair of this one.
Yes, thank you.
So if we could take that away as an action as well, that an order needs to be agreed, so that in future there's no need for debate about who chairs them.
That's a good point. Thank you. Right, enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.